I learned in yeshiva. And amongst my mashpiyah, amongst my yeshiva was Rabbi Frank Pekarsky, was ein gesund. He was the menal of the yeshiva, and he verbringt with us a lot. And he really was a big influence in many of our lives. So was ein gesund. And he verbringt, gedarke. He was an interesting man. He's a brilliant man, he's very smart, but he's also a man of inner war, and that inner war were his verbringens, and that inner war with his verbringens became our inner war in our life. I think that's correct. And I remember him talking about Limud HaGemara, how it's cold and it's dark and it's hungry and you're afraid and you sit and learn Torah. He verbringt with us about how Jewish people survived the darkness of Golus. It was gemacht. And he talked about people sitting in the worst conditions and learning Torah. That was their whole life. It's not that they had nothing else to do, it's what gave them life. And befedish Nigla, Yegia and Iyun and Nigla the Torah, without Oyer, without Ruach HaKodesh, without any special help, just Chochmas HaTorah, sit there and analyze and study and try to understand. And there's no reward. It's not like it's going to paskin halacha l'maaseh. It's not going to get you a job. You're not going to publish a sefer. You push it, want to know another shtickle Torah to understand the Eibish's emes. Your gaito matzasa tamen, the inyan of Torah shebal peh, on a level of intellect, of seichel. Now, of course, we don't mean when you're filled with yeshes and gaiva. We mean when you're learning it because the Eibush gave us the Torah, and the Torah is Torah Kedosha, and through the Torah we come on with Atzmos Moshe and Sav Baruch Hu v'chuli. But be that as it may, the Yegiya to understand the emes of Torah in the deepest, darkest annals of our Golus and our history is, as he put it in that Fabrengen, the reason we still exist. In a different Fabrengen he would say something else, but there's a certain truth to this inyan, and that's the number 6. 6 are miklat as representative of the Shisha Siddur Mishnah, Teresh Balpeh, and of course you could say Siddur Mishnah sort of in between. Teresh Balpeh, Teresh Balpeh, Mishnah Zaysias Neshama. It's not just pure seichel like the Talmud is, but the Rebbe is going to speak now in the next paragraph about 6 are miklat. And what he's going to say about 6 Arei Miklat is it's Teda Diva, Teda Kilt in Pasha, the Yegiya to understand Chochmas HaTorah. Dafka Teda Shabapeh, which is Dafka B'machshakim. It's dark, it's cold, and you're in a cellar. I have a friend, Yankee Tauber. So his Eide was a Tzvi Yuir, Allah Shalom. We called him Mr. Steinmetz, Rabbi Steinmetz. Tzvi Meir Steinmetz. Very interesting man. Very interesting man. And I met him a little bit. I mean, obviously, Yankee Taba was his Einakal. He was a huge influence on his life. And he was a poet. He wrote Shirim. And the Rebbe very much encouraged it, which is a whole other story for another time. But he has a poem called Rishonim. It's 3 lines. It's short. And we were yeshiva 35 years ago in Albany, in Tavshim Memtes. And Yankee would share with me I went through my literary phase when I was with him in the office, in the apartment of the Ramim in that yeshiva that year. And he showed me a poem that his aide had written called Rishonim. And he was brilliant. He was magic with words. In Hebrew, obviously, Lashon Kodesh. But the point was, a man sits and writes, and above him there's a crusade. A crusade! They're killing Jews. And he knows that in a minute or two they're going to come down into the cellar and they're going to kill him. And he's holding his pen, and he's writing one more word of a Tosfos. And his hand is not trembling. And the lucidity of his thought is so crisp, is so sharp, is so unbending because of the fear and the circumstance that the words come out as lucid as if he was sitting in the most comfortable circumstance. That's the toichen, that's the substance of that little shir. And it's historically accurate. But people learn Tosfos, specifically Tosfos, and of course it's true of Torah B'klal, you marvel at the absolute lack of emotion in the reasoning of the Rishonim, of the Tosfos, this Tosfos. It's pure logic. There's no humanity in it at all. And I'm not saying this in a negative, I'm saying it in the most positive way. The thinking is so clear. And the thinking is so focused on wanting to understand that nothing at all, to the slightest possible measure, clouds it. There's nothing poetic about Tosfos, even though it's gorgeous, it's very poetic. But it's written in the most cold and logical way, because these were men who had one interest. Ich will verstehen dein heilige Torah. I want to understand the Torah in its purest and its truest form. And it's hard to understand the Tosfos. But when you understand the Tosfos correctly, you marvel at the precision. There's not an extra comma in a Tosfos. There's not an extra letter in a Tosfos. Because they were singularly dedicated to Chochmas HaTorah. Not because of the word Chochmah, but because of the word Torah. Not even because of the word Torah, but because of the word Neisen HaTorah. And a man knows that in 60 seconds the Crusaders are going to find him, he can write 3 more words. And they have the same lucidity. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's one of the significant tools that explain the survival of the Jewish people in Golos. There's no question about it. And that's 6. Torah Sheba'al Peh. Shishi Sidrei Mishnah, not Chamisha Chum Shitei.